Ambassador Jack Murphy suppressed a sigh as he straightened his formal diplomatic uniform. After 15 years representing humanity to the Galactic Council, he was beyond tired of explaining human quirks to bewildered aliens. Today promised to be another exercise in patience. Ambassador, the Torlaxian delegation is particularly concerned about our security protocols again, said his assistant Miguel. The young man's expression was professionally neutral, but Jack caught the hint of amusement in his eyes. Let me guess. The whole "your guards don't carry weapons" thing? Yes, sir. Ambassador Dreelax specifically requested a meeting before the trade negotiations begin. He called it a matter of grave interspecies concern. Jack rolled his eyes. Of course he did. The Torlaxians bring enough firepower to level a small moon, and they're concerned about our security. Behind them, Commander Diana Powell, head of the Human Diplomatic Security Detail, chuckled. Unlike the heavily armored and conspicuously armed guards of other species, Powell and her team wore simple blue uniforms with minimal protective gear. No plasma rifles. No disintegration pistols. Not even a ceremonial blade. Should I explain our capabilities again? Sir Powell asked, her voice carrying the weary humor of someone who'd had this conversation too many times. No need, Commander. I'll handle the diplomatic tap dance. Jack gestured to the massive doors of the council chamber ahead. Let's get this over with. The Galactic Council chamber never failed to impress, even after all these years. The vast amphitheater housed representatives from 217 spacefaring civilizations, each section customized for different atmospheric requirements, gravitational preferences, and biological necessities. The curved ceiling displayed a real-time map of the galaxy, with member worlds glowing in soft blue light. Today's trade negotiation was critical, the first comprehensive resource-sharing agreement between the Orion Spur civilizations. Humanity needed this deal to secure access to rare materials unavailable in their solar system. The Council needed humanity's unique terraforming techniques. As Jack's team entered, he noticed the usual reaction to their arrival. Curious glances, subtle pointing, whispered comments behind breathing apparatuses and translator modules. Ambassador Dreelax of Torlax, a tall, chitinous being with 4 arms and compound eyes, approached immediately. His personal guards, 8 heavily armed Torlaxian elites, formed a protective perimeter around him, their weapon systems humming with barely contained energy. Ambassador Murphy Dreelax clicked through his translator. I must express my grave concern regarding your security protocols. Our intelligence suggests 3 separate factions oppose this treaty, yet your guards remain unarmed. Jack smiled his most diplomatic smile. Here we go again. Ambassador Dreelax, Jack said, maintaining his diplomatic smile, I assure you our security protocols are more than adequate. Humans have different approaches to protection than Torlaxians. Different. You call complete vulnerability different? Dreelax's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation Jack had learned to recognize. Your guards might as well be ceremonial decorations. Commander Powell maintained perfect composure beside Jack, though he knew she was mentally cataloging at least 17 ways to incapacitate the Torlaxian using only her council credential badge. Perhaps we should address this concern before the formal negotiations, suggested Representative Lumi of the Folian Collective. The luminescent being floated forward, her translucent body pulsing with gentle blues and greens that indicated diplomatic curiosity. Unlike most council species, the energy-based Folians had no need for physical guards, making them one of the few delegates who didn't find the human approach completely baffling. An excellent suggestion, rumbled Security Chief Voxtar of the Krodaki Empire. The massive reptilian stepped forward, towering over most delegates at nearly 3 meters tall. His scales gleamed with embedded technological enhancements, and the 6 elite Krodaki guards flanking him carried enough weaponry to start a small war. The council chambers are secure, but only due to the vigilance of properly armed security forces. I find the human approach concerning. Jack fought back another sigh. The real negotiations hadn't even started, and already they were sidetracked. Perhaps, said Ambassador Krell of the Axiomatic Concordance, his metallic faceplate shifting to express intellectual interest, this is a cultural misunderstanding. The Concordance has studied human history extensively. Your species has a peculiar relationship with weapons technology. That's one way to put it, Jack muttered. Krell continued, his synthetic voice carrying through the chamber. Humans developed planet-killing weapons before achieving reliable interplanetary travel. Most species develop defensive capabilities in response to external threats. Humans developed them in response to other humans. The chamber grew uncomfortably quiet. While Ambassador Krell's historical analysis is fascinating, Jack said, trying to redirect the conversation, I assure you all that our security protocols follow established human diplomatic practices dating back centuries. Our guards are thoroughly trained professionals. Trained to do what? Asked Dreelax incredulously. Politely ask assassins to wait while you call for actual protection. Commander Powell cleared her throat. Sir, if I may. Jack nodded, curious about her approach. 16 delegates, Powell said with professional calm. Human diplomatic security operates on different principles than most council species. We emphasize threat de-escalation, environmental awareness, and rapid adaptation. Visible weapons often escalate tensions unnecessarily. Absurd, Voxtar growled. A visible deterrent prevents violence before it begins. Not in our experience, Powell replied evenly. Your species has barely been spacefaring for a century, clicked Dreelax. What experience could you possibly have that contradicts millennia of galactic security protocols? Jack stepped forward. About 5,000 years of trying to kill each other in increasingly creative ways before we figured out space travel. We learned some things along the way. The uncomfortable silence returned. Ambassador Krell's faceplates shifted again. Perhaps a practical demonstration would help alleviate concerns. A simulated security scenario. Absolutely not, Jack said firmly, recognizing a diplomatic trap. Our security protocols are not performance art. Then how can we trust that our negotiations are secure, demanded Dreelax. Because we've never had a security breach in 15 years of council membership, Jack replied. Results speak louder than theoretical concerns. The negotiations commence in 30 minutes, announced the council arbiter, a neutral AI entity that managed council proceedings. All delegates are required to take their positions. This discussion isn't over, Human Dreelax clicked as he moved toward his delegation section. Jack exchanged glances with Commander Powell. Why do I feel like the universe is about to test our perfect security record, he whispered. Powell's expression remained neutral, but her eyes held a glint of anticipation. Just another day representing humanity, sir. That's what worries me, Jack replied as they moved toward the human delegation's seats. The trade negotiations began with the usual ceremonial proceedings. Representatives from each major galactic power delivered opening statements filled with flowery diplomatic language that essentially amounted to "we want more for less." Jack had learned to tune out most of it, focusing instead on subtle body language and untranslated communications between delegation members. Commander Powell and her team of 6 guards had positioned themselves strategically around the human section. To the untrained eye, they appeared to be simply standing at attention. Jack knew better. Each guard maintained a constantly updated threat assessment, cataloging every potential weapon, exit route, and defensive position in the chamber. The Orion Cooperative seeks assurances that human terraforming techniques will not alter planetary magnetic fields, droned the Orion representative, a gelatinous being floating in a containment field. Previous incidents in the Proxima system raised concerns about long-term stability. Jack prepared his rebuttal when he noticed Commander Powell's posture shift slightly. To anyone else, it would appear she was simply adjusting her stance. To Jack, it was a clear signal. Something was wrong. He glanced casually around the chamber, trying to identify what Powell had detected. The other delegations seemed normal, the Torlaxians still bristling with weapons, the Krudaki maintaining their intimidating presence, the axiomatic concordance's synthetic members sitting in perfect stillness. Then he saw it. The maintenance doors on the lower level had more staff than usual. The staff wore the correct uniforms, but their movements were too purposeful, too coordinated. Jack tapped his communication implant twice, activating the secure channel to his team. Stay alert, but no obvious reactions, he subvocalized. Powell, assessment. 12 individuals with non-standard movement patterns, Powell responded silently through the link. Maintenance and service uniforms, but wearing kinetic dampeners underneath. Not standard council security. Likely armed. Probability of incident. 87% and rising, sir. Jack maintained his diplomatic poker face while his mind raced. The council chamber had multiple security layers, including weapons, scanners, and identity verification. Whoever these infiltrators were, they had significant resources and inside help options. Alert council security quietly, or wait and let our team handle it if necessary, Powell replied. Council alert risks premature action by the infiltrators. Understood. Maintain position. Be ready for Protocol Thunderbird. Jack saw Powell's mouth twitch slightly at the code name. Protocol Thunderbird, named after an ancient Earth myth, was the diplomatic security team's response to armed hostiles in a negotiation setting. It had been deployed exactly twice in 15 years of human council membership. Both incidents had become legendary among diplomatic circles, though the full details remained classified. As the Folian representative began discussing resource allocation algorithms, Jack noticed the false maintenance workers moving into position near key security stations. More concerning, several of the Council's own security personnel were being quietly escorted out of the chamber by others wearing the same uniforms. It's happening in 3 minutes or less, Powell subvocalized. They're clearing out authentic security. Jack gave a microscopic nod and began mentally preparing. The human delegation's position gave them a decent vantage point, but they were also somewhat exposed. Ambassador Dreelax was still eyeing the human guards with suspicion, clearly baffled by their continued lack of response to the obvious security breach developing. 2 minutes and 17 seconds later, exactly as Powell had predicted, chaos erupted. The chamber's main doors sealed with a heavy thud. Emergency lights flashed as the security systems were overridden. 20 armed figures in various service uniforms shed their disguises, revealing combat armor bearing the insignia of the Proxima Liberation Front, a radical faction opposed to Council authority in the Proxima star systems. The Galactic Council's tyranny ends today, announced a tall, cybernetically enhanced humanoid who stepped forward as the apparent leader. For too long, the core worlds have exploited outer rim resources while denying us representation. The council chamber erupted in panic. Most delegates weren't familiar with actual danger. They relied entirely on their security forces, who were now being systematically neutralized. The Torlaxian guards moved to protect their ambassador, but were quickly disarmed by precise stun weapons. The Krodaki forces fared slightly better, managing to form a defensive position before being overwhelmed by superior numbers. Within 30 seconds, most of the chamber's official security forces were incapacitated, leaving the delegates at the mercy of the Liberation Front. Throughout the chaos, Jack noticed the human guards hadn't moved from their positions or shown any reaction at all. Humans barked the cybernetic leader, turning toward the Earth delegation. Your guards seem particularly unthreatening. Perhaps you'd like to surrender before we demonstrate our seriousness. Jack stood slowly, straightening his diplomatic uniform. As Earth's representative, I'm obligated to remind you that attacking a council session is a violation of Galactic Compact Article 17. I suggest you reconsider your actions and pursue diplomatic channels for your grievances. The leader laughed, a harsh sound amplified by cybernetic enhancements. Diplomatic channels? We tried those for 20 years. Now we negotiate from a position of strength. Jack sighed, looking genuinely disappointed rather than frightened. That's unfortunate. May I consult with my security chief briefly before responding to your demands? The leader looked confused by Jack's casual demeanor but nodded. Make it quick. And no communications devices. Jack turned to Commander Powell and said in a normal speaking voice, "It seems diplomacy has failed with these individuals." Powell nodded. "Yes, sir. Traditional diplomacy appears ineffective at this juncture." "I see," Jack said, still remarkably calm. "Then I believe Protocol Thunderbird is appropriate." Powell's professional expression finally broke into a small smile. "Couldn't agree more, sir." The Liberation Front leader stepped forward, weapon raised. "Enough talking. What is this Thunderbird nonsense?" Jack turned back to face him, now wearing a smile that made several nearby delegates instinctively back away. "It's what happens when humans practice weaponized diplomacy," Jack explained cheerfully. "Commander Powell, you may proceed." What happened next would later be described in Council security reports as controlled human chaos. Commander Powell moved first, her hands empty but her intent unmistakable. Teams Alpha and Beta, containment protocol, she said calmly. The 6 human guards who had been standing motionless throughout the entire incident suddenly exploded into action with synchronized precision that made it clear they'd been far from inactive. They had been waiting. The nearest Liberation Front member raised his weapon toward Powell, only to find his arm intercepted by her seemingly casual grip on his wrist. A sharp twist, the sound of breaking bone, and the weapon clattered to the floor. Powell didn't bother picking it up. Instead, she grabbed the ceremonial fountain pen from the nearest diplomat's table and drove it through the attacker's armor joint with such precision that he collapsed instantly, nervous system temporarily paralyzed. Across the chamber, Guard Thomas Rodriguez reached for his credential badge, flicking it with blinding speed. The metal-reinforced ID card sliced through the air and embedded itself in the optical targeting system of a front member's weapon, rendering it useless. Rodriguez followed this by vaulting over the Axiomatic Concordance's delegation table, grabbing a decorative crystalline water vessel, and using it to redirect a stun blast back at its source. "Is that human using a water carafe as a reflective weapon?" gasped Ambassador Dreelax from his hiding place beneath the Torlaxian delegation table. "Technically, it's an Aldebaranian ceremonial hydration vessel," Jack commented, casually ducking as a stun blast passed overhead. "Excellent craftsmanship." Guard Amara Okafor demonstrated why humans needed no conventional weapons by employing the chamber's own architecture against the attackers. She used the curved rail of the speaking platform to launch herself above 2 front members, removing her formal uniform jacket mid-flip. By the time she landed behind them, the jacket had become an improvised garrote, which she used to simultaneously incapacitate both attackers by entangling their cybernetic breathing apparatus. "Did she just weaponize her clothing?" whispered Representative Lumi in disbelief. "Standard human diplomatic security training," Jack explained, now comfortably seated as the chaos unfolded around him. Module 3 improvised countermeasures using standard diplomatic attire. The Liberation Front leader, seeing his forces being systematically dismantled by supposedly unarmed humans, aimed his primary weapon at the Council Arbiter's central processing unit, a hostage that would paralyze the Council's functions. "Stop, or I'll destroy the Arbiter," he shouted. Guard Marcus Chen looked up from where he was efficiently subduing 2 attackers with what appeared to be a decorative council booklet folded into an improbably rigid weapon. Without breaking rhythm, Chen removed his uniform tie, weighted one end with his council medallion, and launched it with precision. The makeshift bowler wrapped around the leader's weapon, fouling its targeting system. "Council literature makes terrible reading, but excellent improvised weaponry," Chen commented dryly. "Too rigid and formal." Commander Powell approached the now disarmed leader, casually picking up a delicate teacup from a hospitality tray as she walked. The leader laughed at this seemingly harmless object until Powell gripped it in a specific way that put pressure on its ceramic edge, turning the teacup into an improvised cutting tool that she held precisely against his cybernetic neck junction. "That's a Centaurian porcelain blend," Powell informed him calmly. "When held at this angle against synthetic integration points, it creates a fascinating effect. Care for a demonstration?" The leader wisely chose to surrender. In precisely 2 minutes and 43 seconds, all 20 Liberation Front members had been neutralized. Not a single human guard had used a conventional weapon. Instead, the chamber was strewn with evidence of their improvisation data cards turned into throwing weapons, furniture repurposed as defensive barriers, decorative items transformed into precision instruments. Guard Layla Nasser was securing the last attacker with restraints fashioned from disconnected power cabling when she noticed Ambassador Krell staring at her in shock. "You appear distressed." "Ambassador," she said politely. "Would you care for water? I promise not to weaponize the glass." The chamber remained in stunned silence as the human guards efficiently gathered the subdued attackers into a secure area. Several diplomatic delegations were still hiding under tables or behind barriers. Ambassador Dreelax's security team, despite their impressive array of now useless weapons, looked thoroughly embarrassed. Security Chief Voxtar was the first to speak. What did we just witness?" Jack straightened his slightly rumpled uniform. "Standard human diplomatic security response. I did mention we have different approaches to protection. Different Voxtar roared. You turned a fountain pen into a neural disruptor. Actually, Powell corrected, as she rejoined the conversation. It's a simple pressure point application using the pen as a precision instrument. The neural disruption is a side effect of the target's own cybernetic enhancements reacting to the pressure, completely non-lethal. But Ambassador Dreelax emerged from hiding, mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. You carry no weapons. That's precisely the point, Jack said with a smile. We don't need to. The implications of this statement slowly dawned on the assembled delegates as they began to understand the truth about human diplomatic security protocols and why humans might choose to leave conventional weapons behind. As the Council's actual security forces finally managed to override the lockdown and enter the chamber, they were greeted by the unusual sight of 20 Liberation Front members neatly restrained and organized by classification of threat level, all accomplished with repurposed conference materials. The Council Arbiter, its systems back online, chimed in with characteristic neutrality. Security breach contained. Casualty assessment 0 fatalities. Injuries 23, all among unauthorized personnel. Property damage minimal, primarily to non-essential decorative elements. The Council chamber gradually returned to order, though delegates kept casting nervous glances at the human guards who had resumed their seemingly passive positions. Jack noticed Ambassador Dreelax whispering urgently to his advisors while pointing at the human delegation. Council Elder Zathraxis, a venerable being whose species had been among the founders of the Galactic Council, activated his hovering platform and glided to the central speaking position. His ancient voice carried surprising authority for someone whose physical form resembled a semi-translucent jellyfish. The Council extends gratitude to the Earth delegation for their unexpected assistance in resolving this security situation. However, I believe many members share concerns about the methods employed. Ambassador Murphy, would you care to explain? Jack nodded respectfully and moved to the speaking platform. He took a moment to survey the chamber, noting the mixture of fear, respect, and confusion on the faces and equivalent sensory apparatuses of the assembled delegates. Honored Elder, esteemed delegates. First, let me assure everyone that all techniques employed by our security team are considered non-lethal by human standards. No permanent harm was inflicted. That guard turned a writing implement into a precision nervous system disruptor, protested a delegate from the Regelian Compact. Jack smiled. As Commander Powell explained, the pen itself isn't the weapon. The application of knowledge is. This brings me to the point I believe everyone is dancing around. Why do human diplomatic guards operate without conventional weapons? He paused, gathering his thoughts. Humanity has a rather extensive history of conflict. Before we achieved unity on our homeworld, humans spent millennia fighting each other with increasingly sophisticated weapons. This led to an arms race that nearly destroyed our civilization. Several delegates nodded. This part of human history was well documented in Council archives. What's less understood is how we survived. You see, throughout our bloody history, humans consistently demonstrated one particular trait: we can turn almost anything into a weapon. As our technologies improved, so did our capacity for violence. Eventually, we realized something profound. Jack gestured to his security team. The most dangerous weapon in any room isn't the plasma rifle or the disintegration pistol. It's the trained human mind that can weaponize whatever is available. Our diplomatic security protocol isn't about disarmament. It's about recognizing that humans don't stop being dangerous just because you take away their guns. A murmur ran through the chamber as translation systems struggled to convey the cultural nuances. Are you saying, Ambassador Krell's metallic voice cut through the noise, that humans deliberately avoid carrying weapons in diplomatic settings because you're more dangerous without them? Not exactly, Jack replied. We avoid carrying obvious weapons because it creates a false sense of security for everyone else. If you can see the weapon, you think you understand the threat. Human history taught us that visible weapons escalate situations unnecessarily while providing minimal actual advantage to trained personnel. But surely conventional weapons would have been more efficient against those attackers, argued Security Chief Voxtar. Commander Powell stepped forward. May I address this, Ambassador? Jack nodded. The Liberation Front expected armed resistance, Powell explained. Their tactics, armor, and approach were designed to counter conventional weapons. What they weren't prepared for was 6 humans with office supplies and furniture. The unexpected is often the most effective, added Jack. But there's another reason, one that goes to the heart of our protocol. The unarmed diplomatic guard policy wasn't created to protect humans from others. He let that statement hang in the air for a moment. It was created to protect others from us. The chamber fell silent. Human history is filled with examples of security forces with increasingly powerful weapons causing increasingly catastrophic collateral damage. By removing conventional weapons from the equation, we force our diplomatic security to focus on precision, control, and minimum effective force. Ambassador Dreelax clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. You're suggesting that your guards don't carry weapons because it makes them less dangerous to bystanders, not more dangerous to threats. Exactly, Jack said with genuine approval. The most important quality in diplomatic security isn't the ability to kill. It's the ability to protect everyone who isn't a threat, while precisely neutralizing those who are. Elder Zathraxis's translucent form pulsed with what Jack recognized as the equivalent of a thoughtful nod. A most illuminating explanation, Ambassador Murphy. The Council will need to reconsider certain assumptions about human security protocols. I would welcome such a reconsideration, Jack replied diplomatically. Now, shall we return to the trade negotiations? I believe we were discussing terraforming technologies. As delegates returned to their positions, Jack noticed the change in how they viewed his security team. The dismissive looks had been replaced by cautious respect. Several species that had previously insisted on keeping significant distance from the human delegation now seemed less concerned about their proximity. Ambassador Krell approached Jack privately. A most effective demonstration, whether intentional or not. I suspect the trade terms may now shift somewhat in humanity's favor. Jack maintained his professional demeanor, but allowed a small smile. I have no idea what you mean, Ambassador. We were simply responding to an unfortunate security incident. Of course, Krell's faceplate shifted in what Jack recognized as the Concordance version of a knowing smile. Just as your guards simply stand around holding data cards, teacups, and fountain pens. As Krell moved away, Commander Powell stepped closer to Jack. Sir, do you think they finally understand? Jack watched the delegates settling back into their positions, occasionally casting glances at the human security team. They're beginning to, he replied. But understanding humanity is always a work in progress, even for us. 3 standard weeks after the Liberation Front incident, Jack found himself back on Earth, enjoying the rare pleasure of actual gravity and non-recycled air in his favorite coffee shop in Geneva. The diplomatic compound's garden offered a pleasant view of Lake Geneva, with the old United Nations building visible across the water. His communication terminal chimed with an incoming priority message. Jack sighed, setting down his coffee, real coffee, not the synthetic approximation served on council stations. He activated the terminal to see Commander Powell's face. Commander, don't tell me our shore leave is being cut short. Powell's expression held the professional neutrality that Jack had learned to recognize as her version of amusement. No, sir. I thought you'd want to see the updated council security protocols that were just approved. They're being implemented immediately for all member species. Jack accepted the data transfer and quickly scanned the document. As he read, his eyebrows gradually rose higher. They created an entire new classification for human diplomatic personnel, he said, unable to keep the incredulity from his voice. Improvised tactical specialists, and they've implemented a mandatory minimum distance between human guards and other species' diplomatic teams. 5 meters, Sir Powell confirmed, unless explicit permission is granted. There's also a new annex listing prohibited items for human security personnel in council chambers. Jack scrolled through the list. They've banned fountain pens, credential badges, uniform ties, and teacups, specifically teacups. Apparently, Officer Chen's creative use of council literature has also resulted in a requirement that all printed materials in the chamber be constructed of non-rigid, tear-friendly substances. Jack leaned back in his chair, torn between laughter and disbelief. They do realize that restricting specific items completely misses the point of our training, right? I believe Ambassador Krell attempted to explain that. Powell replied. The Axiomatic Concordance submitted a minority opinion statement suggesting that the only truly effective security measure would be to require human guards to be, and I quote, completely enclosed in inflatable protective bubbles, while suspended in isolation fields at least 10 meters from any potential improvisation materials. Please tell me that didn't pass. It did not, though the Torlaxian delegation apparently supported it enthusiastically. Jack shook his head, scrolling through more of the document. Any other highlights I should know about? Page 17, sir. New emergency response protocols. Jack navigated to the section and began to laugh. They've created a formal procedure for requesting human intervention in the event conventional security measures prove inadequate were officially a contingency plan. The Kradaki delegation sponsored that amendment, Powell said. Security Chief Voxtar apparently had a change of heart after reviewing the incident footage. Well, that's something, Jack mused, closing the document. Anything else I should know before returning to the diplomatic circus? Powell's expression shifted slightly, showing genuine amusement now. Just one thing, sir. There's been a surge of interest from various species in human diplomatic security techniques. We've received 17 formal requests for training exchanges. Let me guess they all want to learn how to weaponize office supplies. Essentially, yes. The Galactic Council Security Force is particularly interested in what they're calling adaptive threat neutralization methodologies. Jack took another sip of his coffee, savoring both the flavor and the irony. 15 years of trying to convince them we're not bloodthirsty primitives, and now they want lessons in how to fight like us. Should I decline the request, sir? Jack considered for a moment. No, accept them. But make sure the training focuses on the philosophy as much as the techniques. The point isn't learning to stab someone with a stylus. It's understanding when not to. Understood, sir. Enjoy the rest of your leave. Powell out. As the communication ended, Jack leaned back and gazed out at the peaceful lake. The Council's reaction was predictable, focusing on specific items rather than the mindset behind them. They still didn't fully understand. Jack smiled to himself, remembering the face of Ambassador Dreelax when Commander Powell had neutralized the Liberation Front leader with nothing but a teacup. The universe was finally beginning to grasp what humanity had known since their earliest conflicts. The most dangerous weapon in any room wasn't the technology. It was the intelligence wielding it. His communication terminal chimed again with a message from the human diplomatic corps. Jack scanned it quickly and chuckled. The corps was requesting his input on whether to inform the Council about Protocol Chimera, the even more specialized training program for diplomatic staff operating in high-risk environments. One revelation at a time, Jack murmured to himself as he declined to respond. Let them get used to Thunderbird first. After all, if the Council was this disturbed by human guards turning stationary into weapons, they definitely weren't ready to learn about ambassadors who could do the same thing. Some human quirks were best kept as surprises. For now,